The first global media report about this phenomena was in September of 1967, when a female horse named Lady was found dead on a ranch near Alamosa in southern Colorado. The horse's entire skull and long neck had been stripped of flesh, and every organ in the chest of that horse had been surgically excised according to a medical doctor. There was no blood anywhere, not in the animal, not around the animal, and nowhere nearby. And there were no tracks of the animal. It was powdery soil, and the animal is lying there stripped of flesh, but there were no tracks around the body, not even the own horse's tracks. But 100 and some feet away, there were horse tracks in a circle, as if the horse had been caught in something in which the feet had gone around in a circle, and then 100 and some feet away, the body was found. At that same time, and Jennifer, image 00, on July 15th, 1984, the Sunday Times in Australia headline, quote, "Cover-up alleged over UFO-linked animal slaughter. Many reports of UFOs and strange lights in the sky," close quote. "Farmers in the Adelaide Hills have discovered mutilated animal corpses and burn marks on the ground. In one incident, researchers say a farmer discovered 4 cows with holes drilled into their skulls and the brains removed." Adelaide UFO researcher Colin Norris said, quote, "I have been told the Army asked the farmer to remain quiet about the animals and that the Army would cover the whole thing up," close quote. Mr. Norris said pod marks in the ground and burnt treetops indicated a UFO craft had landed. That was Australia in 1984, and we should have up that headline at 00. Yes. And Australia has played a very interesting role in this historically, because the BBC in 1979, when I started the work on A Strange Harvest, there was a producer there who told me that they had a journal from 1911 that had been published about 104 sheep being found in an Australian billabong with an ear, eye, tongue, genitals, and rectum cored out. 104 all in one billabong with no blood and no tracks around those animals either. Image 13. This map shows geographic areas where animal mutilations have been reported since 1967 at least, barring the fact that Australia has reported many before. By 2013, every state in the United States and every province in Canada have had bloodless, large animal mutilations, as well as other countries. No one knows for certain how many animals have been mutilated over the past half century in the United States and Canada and around the world. Many mutilated animals are not reported because ranchers are either afraid or do not want public attention and potential ridicule. Image 14. Beyond the United States and Canada, mutilated animals have been reported in Mexico, Panama, Puerto Rico, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, parts of Europe, the Canary Islands, China, and Australia. Image 1. Excisions are not only smooth and bloodless, they can be serrated the way that pinking shears cut cloth for dressmakers, as was discovered in this 2-year-old Hereford steer, the 5th mutilation on the Richard Fazio Ranch near Portland, Oregon, within a 4-month period ending in October of 1990. Image 2. Here is a photograph of the uniformly serrated edge of the mutilator's bloodless excision that many people who have had these in their hands in the field say do look like some kind of pinking shears has cut the steer's tissue. Image 3. Here is a close-up of that particular serrated edge from the side in the 1990 Oregon steer's serrated excision that an Oregon State University veterinary diagnostic laboratory reported had been cut with high heat, image 5, consistent, and I'm reading now from the Oregon State University Veterinary Laboratory assessment, quote, consistent with a specimen collected via electrosurgical excision, it is not possible to tell whether this lesion was caused by a laser. It does appear consistent with a heat-induced injury, close quote. Image 4. Here is another similar serrated edge found on a mutilated cow in 1975, we're going back almost 20 years, by the Cascade County Sheriff's Office in Great Falls, Montana. The issue of lasers came up early in the animal mutilation mystery because there was no blood. There had to have been some kind of cautery. But then I worked with John Altschuler, MD, pathologist and hematologist in Denver, Colorado, going out to animal mutilation sites myself to collect tissue and fluid for him to study from the animals. One of his first confirmations was cooked hemoglobin in a mutilated cow. Slide 6. Here is what normal cow collagen looks like under a microscope, image 7. And here is mutilated cow tissue in which the hemoglobin has been cooked by high heat at the excision site. Dr. Altschuler also showed me photomicrographs of the mutilator's excision in comparison with known laser surgery. Dr. Altschuler said, quote, the animal mutilation excisions do not show any carbon, but Earth life is carbon-based and all tissue exposed to the heat of a laser should show carbon residue that looks like black pepper grains under a microscope, quote, unquote. We never found any carbon residue on mutilator excisions we studied, raising the question, what is the surgical instrument? Does it work by sound frequencies or some other technology unknown to Earth medical science? Image 8. Here is a classic example of the bloodless removal of an udder from a cow that had just given birth in Ashdown, Arkansas, discovered on the morning of March 11, 1989. And I'm showing you, letting you know, this is one of the cleanest kind of phenomena. The excision is there, and the animal is not alive, but you can see how pristine the scenes are. The editor of the Little River News, Jim Williamson, contacted me, and I called Dr. Altschuler, who wanted Jim Williamson to cut a rectangle of cowhide that would include the mutilator's cut. Dr. Altschuler said tissue slides from this cow, quote, prove that the cutting was done quickly with a hot instrument of some kind, close quote. He reported, quote, examination of the tissues after fixation revealed cut edges to be very hard, difficult to cut, and appearing somewhat darker than the surrounding tissues, which does relate to high heat. Image 9. Photomicrograph number 1 has an arrow which points to the separation line. The abnormal tissue on the left shows a smudged pink change with nuclear fragmentation, indicating tissue destruction and death. These changes are referred to as coagulative necrosis. The band between cutting margin and normal tissue is quite thin, suggesting that the dissection was done with what appears to be a pinpoint accuracy and minimal dissipation of heat at the cut line, close quote. The heat is confined to a millimeter in these excisions. Image 10. This photomicrograph shows dark pinkish blue parallel bundles of cells at the cut edge of the tissue. These changes are referred to as the string bean sign by a pathologist, indicating tissue exposure to high heat, as in laser or hot needle surgery, but again, there is no carbon residue. Image 11. In this photomicrograph, the tissue is from below the hide surface and is called dermis. The upper portion clearly shows many spaces called vacuolar changes where the arrow is, which result from tissue cooking or exposure to high temperatures, probably above 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Image 12. In the lower left-hand corner of this photomicrograph is a distinct color change from a light normal pink to a dark pink. The darker collagen tissue is damaged from some injury source, but shows a striking lack of inflammatory change. This suggests that the procedure of injury was relatively fast. Taking all the microscopic findings into account, one would have to conclude that the surgical procedure performed on these animals took place quickly, probably in a minute or two, and utilized high temperature heat as a cutting source applied in a fine probe or cutting instrument, close quote. And we are talking about the excision of an ear, eye, jaw flesh, tongue, the sexual organs, and the rectum in less than 2 minutes, leaving physical evidence that has been repeated. Myself, I have cut tissue from at least 30 of these animals in pastures all over the United States, and all of the findings are exactly the same. How do you excise large sections of tissue and leave the evidence of high heat without carbon residue, no blood and no tracks around the animals, and do it in 2 minutes or less? But this is a phenomena that I understand has been going on for thousands of years, and we are just catching up to it. And when Sheriff Tex Graves, in September of 1979, in my very first interview with somebody in law enforcement about animal mutilations when I began doing A Strange Harvest, told me, Linda, the perpetrators are creatures from outer space, quote unquote. And I felt the same shock that perhaps you do. The truth is, law enforcement has long known from their own eyewitness accounts, they've seen the beams of light in pastures. Ranchers have seen the glowing discs put beams down. Ranchers have seen animals rise into these glowing discs. The glowing discs have been seen lowering animals down in beams of light to pastures where they are then mutilated. And to get those people, law enforcement or ranchers, to stand up in front of a camera and tell the world what they've seen with their own eyes is the biggest difficulty of my entire career, because we are on a planet where humans are more afraid of humans and their ridicule than they are of extraterrestrials.